It's been exciting. A lot of people have been contacting me, people that I hadn't heard from for years that knew me, people that I don't know now know me, and they're all fascinated with what's going on here at Mount St. Helens and the North Fork Toutle River. So I guess it's working. We're getting the message out to people to be able to see this wonderful landscape.
Were you surprised by that at all?
Actually, I was, because in the past, you know, over 45 years, I've been interviewed a couple times, but you get your 15 minutes of fame, everybody says it's great, and then it goes away. Now, we've seen an insurge of interest. Our local elected officials now are setting up meetings. They're starting to talk about what's going on here, and we're starting to get the attention that this most unique area deserves and was intended from the beginning. So, when they created the Volcanic National Monument, it was supposed to be set aside for future generations. And I think that a lot of the decisions that we've made over the years have taken away from future generations' ability to make decisions that would be better help for them. And that's one of the big problems that we see, is decisions that aren't being made locally and by people who actually do live here and recreate. You know, it's been fun. When we first started, it's been over a decade ago, I didn't know what to expect. And you know, when you tell you're going to bring a bunch of students from England and Nottingham, and they're going to come out and they're going to do research in the North Fork Toutle River, I didn't have any idea of the intensity of it, the detail of it, and the work. These students put in long days, hard days, hiking through the mud flow, the sediment, and collecting data that should be using to make these decisions. And as far as I know, they're the only group that is coming through here and doing this. And it's really fun to watch them, because you see how excited they are and how they see the future here and how they see the landscape changing every year. As Rafi pointed out, you know, they study this in England. They don't just come here. So they already have some idea of what it's like, but then when they get here, it's indescribable, because being here, there is no substitute.
You were also saying to me on the ride down here how it's amazing that it takes a group from all the way in UK to come here, and that we don't have more research like this going on here from our own local students.
Yeah, it's kind of sad when you think about it, that you know, you have to bring students from halfway around the world to come to appreciate what's in our own backyard. And we don't see any of our institutions in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, California studying this world's youngest landscape and in detail like they are. And you would think more groups would want to take advantage of the fact that this is in their own backyard. And it's sad that we don't have that type of relationship with the University of Nottingham and our local institutions.
Is there anything that they have learned, and I'm sure you do discuss with them what they do during a day, about in their research that surprised you?
I think the biggest thing that surprises me is in the last couple of years, it's been the channelization of the streams, which we can see with our native eyes when we go up and look down, but they actually have gone out and measured them, and they show that this isn't such a wild, ribbiting river. It's now channelizing, it's stabilizing, and mainly because of the habitat that you see growing and you know, the vegetation. That's key to creating and stabilizing sediment. We don't see that when the sediment structures are raised and they just back sediment. It takes decades to create the habitat and environment that you see. And right now I think we're at a pivotal turning point where you see it growing faster because it's migrated so much quicker. And so in just the last few years, it's really kicked in. And now we have trees that are, you know, getting up to 20 feet tall in the sediment plain. And we're hoping that they're going to stabilize the soils and the river and the banks better than just the barren landscape that we had in 2010.
I think it sounds to me kind of like one of those things where you're here every day, and when you are, you don't notice all the things gradually, but when someone comes far away 1 year, and then they leave, and then they come back the second year, they see the things that just crept up on you gradually.
Oh yeah, and I get to be here more than most people, and so I do monitor and get to see it happening, but you don't realize how fast it's happened. And then when they come back and you tell them about a trail that they need to take, and they said, well, that trail was really overgrown, we couldn't even get out there. I'm like, really? You know, I hadn't been on it for a couple months, but you know, and they do change rather rapidly, so it's a lot of fun. And the students are very positive in wanting to experience the sediment plain. As you can see, they run off and get some time, not just doing the work, just to experience nature. And where else would you experience this in this way?
Not in the UK.
No.
All right, Mike, I have some questions that Jesse sent, so I want to
Sure.
make sure I get through these and do my diligence. And you've kind of moved off your mark. Let me have you take one step more that way.
Okay.
And I will also go this way, just so I
Okay.
make sure I have that framed in the way that I was trying to do because of what we're talking about
Okay.
and everything else. I shouldn't be rolling on this, but I am because, yeah. All right, so here we go. First question. Why start this effort? Pause, stop the spillway crest raise.
The important thing to do is to make sure that the decisions we make up here, because they are so critical to the future environment and habitat here, that we're making the right ones, and we're basing them on the latest information and facts. I'm not a scientist, I'm a citizen, but I have read, studied, and learned and been able to work with some of the best scientists in the world, and they all come up with the same thing. A river like this changes constantly, so it's very difficult to take a solution that's based on data from 40 years ago or 35 years ago and keep following that direction when you stand and look and go, but it's changing. That's not how it is today. And then to see that the SRS structure is functioning and doing its job to a point, but it's not taking into consideration the return of the natural resource, the landscape, fish, the habitat. Those things were all part of that too. And while we do have to look at sediment in the lower river and protecting the houses and cities below, we also have to remember we're also charged with protecting and establishing the natural habitat above it and the natural landscape. And you know, it's equal. It's not one or the other, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. We can do this in unison. We have 45 years of experience today, and we have some really brilliant minds that have come up with natural engineering that is head and shoulders above what we knew in 1980. When the mountain blew, you know, nobody knew, so we did everything that we thought was right. It's not that it's wrong, it's just different today. And I think it's very important that we take a pause and we really look at it to make sure we're getting the best benefit out of this $56 million, you know, investment. We want it to last and get our value.
I think you kind of just answered that, but the next question was, this plan was already put in motion 4 decades ago. Why try to change course now? And you had just kind of said, to paraphrase that, it's different now. It's not
different, and it's the right thing to do, to revisit before you actually make an action that's going to change the lives of everyone in this area and everyone basically that comes to visit this, not only our life, but every elk, fish, wildlife, and habitat that tries to survive here.
even the frogs.
Even the frogs.
Who else is involved in this effort? Who else supports this?
Well, Colin Thorne, who you heard from, of course, the University of Nottingham. Also, our local county commissioners have becoming more knowledgeable. And Steve Rader is one who has taken the lead. He's a new county commissioner in Cowlitz County. He has been up here and on the sediment plain. And that's the key, is I have to get people on the sediment plain to get their feet wet, to see that it is the right thing to do. You know, you can sit in a meeting and you can read a report and you can be told by agencies that are funded and have projects that they're working that this is the right thing to do. But is it? We have other agencies that are non-government fish organizations and habitat restoration, which also agree. Most all the aquatic scientists that I've talked to, and also some of the USGS and volcanology people that are here, also agree that maybe we should revisit this at this time before we commit to a 10-foot raise and 40 more years of change.
Is the Spirit Lake Toutle River Collaborative involved?
The collaborative was initially in the beginning very informative of getting people together and bringing all this knowledge, in over the last 3.5 years. And that's where I've picked up a lot of the information that I tried to share with everyone. And that's what has driven my direction of saying, I sit in the meeting and I get told this, and then I turn around and I learn that the Army Corps of Engineers is going to do a spillway raise. When for over the last 3 years I've heard of the fish improvements, the life improvements, the habitat changes, the beaver restoration that we've done here, the wall-based channels, and you can see that. And I'm concerned that with this raise, it's going to affect all of those changes that have been positive with a huge negative.
It's tricky. The sediment from the eruption caused a lot of problems with flooding and blocking shipping channels in the communities downstream. The SRS was built to mitigate those problems going forward. How should the needs of those communities be balanced with the natural recovery of this system?
Well, you are correct. The eruption of Mount St. Helens and the sediment and mud flow that came down did affect those cities. But our cities are only 100 years old in the area. We built them in estuaries of the Toutle River on the Columbia. Most of their sea levels were below, sea level, 6 feet, 5 feet. So they were all diked and put in for reasons of economy, scale, and access to the river. We didn't take into consideration that we were at the end of a volcanic river, with Mount St. Helens, where it would send all this mud, sediment, and debris. So in a way, it wasn't the eruption's fault. We made this decision years ago. And what we need to understand is we're all in this together, okay? We can't move the city and change it, and we're not gonna stop the volcano from erupting. So what we really need to do is we learn how to live together. How can we coexist and commune with nature to have a solution instead of trying to control it? And that's what's really driving me here, is I think that we're at that point where if we really look at it, we can actually start to accomplish that. And instead of single unit fixes like dams or the SRS structure, we need to look at what we really need to put together. We have 16.5 miles of river. This isn't the only spot that we should be trying to stabilize sediment. We should move upstream now to other areas where we can start to get another plateau, get the vegetation and habitat starting to grow, and then create another area like this so that we have reserves and not just be totally dependent on the SRS. And then keep this sediment raise as an emergency case, that if the mountain wakes up or if we see a change, we still have that, because they only have 2 raises left with this structure. And then what are we gonna do?
Colin said 1.
Or 1, yeah, I'm sorry, 1 raise left with this structure of 10 feet. And then what are we going to do after that? After 2035, that's all you hear. That's the Army Corps mandate, 2035. But then what do we do? And that's one of the problems I have, is we should have a plan in place that's going to be more cooperative with nature.
And it's right around the corner, yeah. You said that really well. Tell us what will happen at the September 23rd County Commission workshop.
The September 23rd County Commissioner meeting is the first that I know of that has invited the public, the diking districts, all government agencies and everything to come together. And this is part of what the collaborative was intended to do. The National Academy of Science met 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, and said we needed that. We needed to bring everyone together to talk and come up with a solution here. And to my knowledge of being on the mountain, just in my short 45 years since the eruption, this is the first time that I've seen this actually come together. And the public is invited. It's very important that you come and learn so that you can voice your opinion and understand what's happening. And all these agencies coming together, my hope is that they'll say, maybe we should pause and reevaluate. What's wrong with taking another look at it? We're not in an emergency situation. Things aren't flooding. There isn't problems. And the problems that they have identified for Castle Rock, Lexington, and the communities below are not going to be fixed by this raise. Their problems are localized on their dikes and their areas that need to be repaired in river there. So, or they could be better served by dredging, site dredging in their area, instead of basically making this a sacrifice zone again.
That's an interesting way of putting it. This is overdue.
Oh, very much so. In the beginning, when they formed the monument and they formed all this, and if you read all of the plans, we were supposed to visit this every 5 years. The scientific group was supposed to come together. But like all good intentions, the government came in and built it with no maintenance and no constant direction. What we've watched here is Mount St. Helens go from a $256 million investment and this supposed to be an economic engine for our community to a forgotten landscape that is barely funded and is not getting the attention that it deserves. It is the most unique landscape in North America for sure, and we're one of the most unique counties in the nation. As far as I know, the only county that sits at the base of a river from an active volcano in North America. So you would think that we would come up with different decisions and a little more attention, because everything we learn here can help us in other areas. The tragedy we just saw in Texas with the river structures there, we thought they were safe, but they weren't. Studies up here can help us learn more to make better adaptive management plans for all of our rivers and streams.
When something unpredictably catastrophic just shows up in just a matter of minutes.
And when it does, it will. And nature changes things in an instant, not in centuries.
What will come next after?
The meeting? I'm hoping that at the meeting that the group will come together and request that we could have a feasibility study to be able to put in balance the raise compared to the data and information that's been collected to other solutions that would be more cost effective. The big problem I have being, a taxpayer is $56 million is what we're going to spend on this project. And it has been said that we'll gain 5, 10, maybe 15 years if we're really lucky. But our experience from these raises have been 3 to 5 years. So $56 million investment for that short period of time, I am uncomfortable with. I think what I have learned with the collaborative over the last 3 years is there are some really great ideas that could be done for a lot less money to help rough up the riverbed and create different levels of storage closer to the mountain. And with the spillway coming out of Spirit Lake that we're not even looking at addressing with this, but it's happening now, we need to look at all of our resources. And back when the mountain first erupted, the N1 structure, which was the first sediment dam type structure that they created in the river, upstream about 6 miles from here, could be a nice thing to look at utilizing and start to create more of these in-stream structures to hold sediment higher in the valley. And again, stabilizing the sediment with vegetation and habitat.
You seem to be reading the mind, because the next question, I think you answered this, but I'll just ask it again, just in case you missed the point, is ultimately what would you like to see come out of this effort, and what do you think will need to happen to achieve it?
I think that I would like to see a review for the feasibility and the cost value, and that we're making the best decision with the knowledge and engineering that we have. I want to see a opportunity to have nature-based solutions that we can actually bring fish back and habitat. With this, they're also telling you that we're going to have fish mitigation. That's going to be another trap and truck program, which has been very dismal in operation here due to the nature of the river and the sediment. Last year we transported less than 100 fish in an area that we had 38,000 Chinook salmon in 1978. So a lot of us locals are disappointed because we have not seen the attention to bringing back fish habitat and transportation What we'd like to see is a natural fish passage to allow all species of fish to be able to return here and have that as a bigger priority. It's been 45 years since the mountain erupted, and we don't have fish passage back upstream without a truck and a guy driving them. I think that's one of the biggest problems that I see that they're not doing. And with this project, they have mitigation to rebuild that, but they're not in place. There's no funding for it, and so we have to wait. So I feel that too would be a benefit. One of my other concerns is that if this beautiful green area that is controlling temperatures in the water now through here is brought back as the desert and wiped all this out from the rays, that you'll see water temperatures rise again. In the beginning, fish passage behind the SRS was not done as much and concerning because of water temperatures. It was too warm to get through the sediment plain. But we have in the last 12 years watched the wall-based channel structure, the vegetation cooling down the river and the river channelizing to deeper levels, and we're seeing water temperatures where they can actually survive. So I feel that this would be a big mistake to make 3 miles of river too warm for fish to pass while we're investing above this to get fish habitat stabilized.
Have you brought your concerns to the Army Corps?
I've talked with the Corps. I'm trying to talk more with the Corps. I have looked at talking locally, but you have to remember that decisions aren't made here. The decisions for this are usually made in DC by funding and by our congressmen who haven't been here to see this. And that's one of the biggest problems that I have when you talk to Senator Murray, Cantwell, Perez, our representative. They all have been here with an Army Corps tour on the sediment dam. They haven't been here out on the sediment plain behind it to see it. And if they have, they were in a helicopter, so they didn't get to see on the ground. And that's a disappointing thing, because you shouldn't be making decisions that you don't have all the facts based on. And I'm concerned about that because we aren't seeing the attention that it deserves. And the last thing I want is, at my age, is to see this happen, this area depleted again, and my grandchildren asking, gee, I thought you tried to stop that, Grandma.
I want to come back to something that you said a little earlier. You called it an economic engine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the way things were before and what was here, what should be here, what this place was. If it's not an economic engine now, like, what is it? You know, what has it become?
Its intention was to replace the thousands of timber jobs and the timber economy that we had here that was taken away by the eruption. You know, we had the largest sawmill in the world in Longview at the time. Weyerhaeuser, one of the biggest timber companies in the world. So the thought was to create, with the attraction of Mount St. Helens and this world's youngest landscape, was a economic move into more tourism, science, and study. But unfortunately, there were catches to it. The U.S. Forest Service was put in charge of a monument to operate with brick and mortar instead of just landscape. And unfortunately, the U.S. Forest Service wasn't totally equipped to be able to do that from a funding side, because they don't receive line item funding for the monument. So while they got all the money again to build it, there was no operational money for maintenance. Had this become a national park, which it deserved and still deserves today, they would have gotten line item funding, and maybe it wouldn't have been enough money, but it would have been the same amount every year at the tune of about $5 million. And then the 5 world-class visitor centers that we had up and down the highway here, and the 3.5 million tourists that were coming in 1995, would have dwindled down to maybe 1 million, 1.5 million, and we wouldn't see motels not open, gift shops not open, and restaurants closed, and gas stations on 504. You know, the lack of continual maintenance and funding for both the private sector and the public sector was taken away.
Driving up Mark, I passed all of what you just described. Gas stations that are closed and have been for a long time, other buildings that look like they were tourist attractions, and they are caving in on themselves because they haven't been operational probably since. I don't know if you're afraid of bees, but you've got one around here that's really Let's finish this up before these bees go to town. I've got two last questions.
Sure.
I can tell, Mark, that you really you feel like you have a real responsibility towards your own grandkids, or in another way of saying, like, the next generations, to shepherd this, to really make sure this doesn't go away, that you owe it to them to do.
Well, that's something, unfortunately, that I learned being here over the last 35 years with my business, and being in the valley for 45 years here, and being on the mountain before, is that to live your life the best you want to live, and be able to be out here in this beautiful wonder of nature is fantastic. I'm the richest person you'll ever meet because of the way my life is being able to be lived. But with that comes a big responsibility to make sure future generations have that same opportunity. And today, too many people are concerned with themselves and not with nature and the whole. The future generations are our future. That's why they're called future generations. And if we can't leave someplace better, or at least with options for the future, then we shouldn't be here. We're not doing our job. We're not taking our responsibilities. And I'm very adamant about that we should not be making decisions hastily here for life changing, and not just for a year or two, for centuries. This decision will change this valley forever, and it's a forever decision. And are we really ready to make that decision today? I don't think so. And that's why I'm fighting so passionately and trying to get the information out to people. I don't have the ultimate solution. I'm not a engineer. I'm not getting paid for any of this. I'm not making money off of any of this. I want future generations to be able to make those decisions. But in my 45 years involved with Mount St. Helens, the decisions we've made in the past have not benefited the people that are here, nor future generations. So I'm just trying. My grandma summed it up the best, I think. She told me when I was young, I never did anything, but I did a lot, and so I am trying. And I will keep trying, and I'll try every day. And I hope that other people will see this information and join in and saying, I should be more concerned and involved. And it is your land and your environment. But that comes with responsibility. So.
Here's my very last question. What are we looking at behind you?
You're looking at the SRS, which is 128 feet tall, 1,800 feet long, man-made structure. It was called the SRS because it was going to be the single retention solution. Then they realized that there was no single solution here. So then they changed it to the sediment retention structure, because they didn't want to call it a dam, because dams would have different problems, and this really wasn't a dam. It was the best we could come up with in 1980 as a solution to the Corps to hold back the sediment. But today we have better knowledge in engineering, and we won't remove this. I mean, it's here. It's one of those forever structures. But we can modify how we want to use it, and use it wisely, because it's already built and it's already here. And I think that taking into consideration what we can do now in not supporting the 10-foot raise but moving upstream would be a wiser solution. And that's also not against the Corps' plan. Their plan was second phase was to move upstream with other structures. So we're just asking them to go to their phase 2 without completely depleting phase 1.
It looks like there's something going on over there.
Yeah, they looks like they're doing some action on it, and that's because their plan to raise it this year in 2026, next year in July. So I'm sure they're doing some testing and modifying and checking things out, because they've already received the $56 million to raise the structure.
When they say raise, do you have any idea of how that would look here with this? Like literally the wall comes up a certain amount of height, or what would we see?
It would be over here past the conic tower there, where you see the opening in the gap with the shotcrete by the tall trees. That's where it will be raised. And what you'll have there is a 10-foot structure that will go up and then all of this will back up behind it. Because it's the outlet, not the original dam. So they're doing a spillway raise on it. And that's where the passage and fish passage is. So that's going to create a 10-foot height on the outlet, which will create more problems. And it also will affect tributary streams up here for salmon recovery, Alder, Deer Creek, Poland Creek, because as it backs up, it will choke those streams out for fish passage again.
I'm glad I asked you that because I did not realize. I'm going to make sure I get this right because I want to shoot this. You're talking about that spot right there with those tall trees next to that wall-looking thing. The wall comes up to it, and then there's the trees. That's the spot.
The outlet. Mm-hmm.
Let me shoot that. So when you say outlet, what is happening there right now? What is anything letting out through there?
Oh yeah, that's where the water goes around the SRS structure and tail out goes down around it. So it bypasses, so the water bypasses and carries the sediment on downstream that's not staying up here. It also was designed to be fish passable so fish could come back up through there in the future once water started going down it. But in '96 we had a flood which damaged the bottom of it and fish can't pass back up, and they've never repaired it in the past because this area wasn't palatable for fish. The temperatures were too high for them to travel through the water, so they weren't concerned about it. But today that's all changed. And so a prudent thing would be to look at making that fish passable and not doing a truck and trap program, which has been estimated to be $30 million. So right now, today, we're looking at, with their solutions, it would be around $86 million for them to raise the spillway 10 feet and build a new trap and truck fish program. So you have to ask yourself, is that a reasonable investment at this time? And you're absolutely correct, and that's where our elected representatives need to come here in person, on the ground, and see what we're talking about. Because you can't read a report, you can't attend a meeting, and a slideshow does not give the massive structure of what you're looking at.
Wow, Mark, I cannot believe that. That is, to me, the big surprising thing of this story that I've done today, is to learn that that is the spillway. That's what we're talking about right there. You're right, I would not know flying over in a helicopter. How would you know? Wow. I would have just made the assumption that big thing would have been it.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's what everybody does. All right. Is there anything that I missed that I didn't know to ask that you think that you should mention or someone should mention before I wrap this up?
I think that's it. I mean, and you know, everyone asks me why I'm doing this since it's funded, it will be built, they have the money, they have the momentum, they're the United States Army Corps. But again, I think trying to do the right thing is never too late. So I'm going to continue to try and bring attention to this, to pause the process so that we can be assured that we're making the best possible decision at this time.